Hello folks, today I'm reviewing a cheap hobby grade style RC truck from Amazon. It's one of those products from China that's available under a bunch of different names and from different sellers. The Amazon listings always have a title that's an entire paragraph trying to squeeze in every possible search term. The particular one I found was called Imden Remote Control Car Terrain RC Cars Electric Remote Control Off-Road Monster Truck 1/18th Scale 2.4 GHz Radio 4-wheel drive fast 30 plus miles per hour RC car with 2 rechargeable batteries blue. Say that 5 times fast. Or 1 time fast without taking rescue oxygen. Anyway, this model is often called the Sandyland truck because that's what it says on the body. And I believe the official model is PX9300 or simply PX9300. As the ad says, it's a 1/18th scale 4-wheel drive truck. It's built in the style of a hobby grade RC, and it's a fairly complete package with some lofty claims, so I wanted to try it out and see if it's any good and if it's worth your time and money. I'll be testing out the 30 mile per hour top speed claim, as well as the 20 to 30 minute battery life claim to find out what you can expect out of this truck. In my opinion, to truly be hobby grade, it should not only have a particular construction style or performance level, it should also have repair parts available. The good news is that I did find some replacement parts online. I didn't find everything, so depending on what breaks, you may be searching a while, or you could simply be out of luck. But this truck doesn't cost any more than many toy grade RC cars, and they aren't repairable at all, so it may still seem like a no-brainer, but toy grade RC cars are usually much slower by design. That might sound like a pure negative attribute, but it does make them much less likely to break. Speed and power are really hard on components, and the faster and more powerful an RC car is, the more likely it is to break or wear out drivetrain components, especially if it's cheaply built. And even an expensive RC car can break, so the ability to get replacement parts is ever more important as the performance goes up. Cheap is relative, but compared to brand name hobby RC vehicles, this truck is fairly cheap for what you get. It includes 2 850 mAh LiPo batteries and a balancing charger. The charger is powered by USB, but be aware it doesn't come with a USB power supply. I used a 2 amp output phone USB charger and it worked fine. The charger isn't super fast, but it does seem to balance the cells quite well. It also includes a couple of tools, some extra body clips, and a couple of extra wheel nuts, which is a nice touch. It even includes 3 AA batteries for the transmitter. The transmitter itself feels super cheap, but if it works okay, I'm not too bothered by it feeling cheap. The truck has a removable Lexan body shell, and it uses a fairly standard shaft-driven 4-wheel drive layout. One of the first things I noticed when I took it out of the box was a lot of resistance in the drivetrain. I actually removed the motor and confirmed that the differentials are tight in their bushings. The differential output yokes are plastic and spin directly in the bronze bushings, and it may free up with use, and it might hold up okay, but it doesn't inspire confidence that it's a robust drivetrain for a 30 mile per hour RC truck. On the plus side, the differentials are one of the parts that I found available for sale. It has a combination receiver and speed control unit, and the servo uses a non-standard plug. So if any of that fails, you'll have to find exact replacements or just get all new electronics. The motor appears to be fairly standard, but depending on the shaft size and the gear pitch, that'll determine how easy it is to find a replacement for it. The suspension has plenty of travel, and unsurprisingly, it uses plastic friction shocks rather than oil-filled shocks. The springs are too stiff for the weight, so it'll be a bouncy ride that doesn't soak up bumps very well. Overall, the steering and suspension is a bit loose and imprecise, but as long as it holds up well, I'm not too bothered by a little wobble. The bouncy suspension will hurt traction on rough ground, but the tires seem fine. They aren't foam-filled, but at this size and weight, it's not really a problem. And they seem grippy and have good tread. So let's get out and run the thing and see how it performs and how it holds up. First, let's talk about the speed claims. Even before driving it, I was confident that it wouldn't go 30 miles per hour, just based on years of experience in the RC hobby, including previously owning a 1/18th scale RC that could go around 30 miles an hour. As soon as I drove this truck, It was obvious that it didn't go nearly 30 miles per hour, but I still wanted to measure it and find out exactly how fast it is, rather than just saying it isn't 30 miles an hour. I drove the truck a bit prior to speed testing just to break in the motor brushes and hopefully wear in and free up the drivetrain a bit. I tested the top speed on my flat, paved driveway with a fully charged battery fresh off the charger. I put lines on the driveway at exactly 10-foot intervals, and I did multiple runs in both directions using 2 separate cameras, and then I compared and confirmed the results. Using the lines on the pavement and counting the frames in the videos, I calculated a top speed of 12.5 miles per hour, or roughly 20 kilometers per hour. Nowhere near the claim in the ads. Blatantly false claims like this bother me, so don't take what I'm about to say as meaning I'm okay with lies in the product ads, because I'm not. But I am fine with it only going 12.5 miles an hour. I think that's actually a reasonable speed for an RC truck like this. It's still fast enough to be fun, especially since it has good torque and it accelerates quickly. It stops well too, with surprisingly good braking performance. All in all, it's a fun little truck that goes well in rough terrain for its size. It's fun to just bash it around in a small yard like mine. The peppy acceleration makes it feel faster than the 12.5 mile per hour top speed might sound, particularly if you have a relatively small area to drive in. I do think that the false claims are a knock against the sellers of this truck, but the actual top speed isn't a big negative for me. In my opinion, it's probably better off that it doesn't go 30 miles an hour. As I mentioned before, it really isn't built to handle the power that it would take to go 30 miles an hour. Even if the drivetrain didn't fail quickly, the loose steering and bouncy suspension would make it absolutely impossible to control that kind of speed. Besides, 30 miles an hour in a 1/18th scale RC isn't very practical for anything other than straight line speed runs on a smooth surface with a lot of room. If this thing could go 30 miles an hour, I would have had to take it to an open parking lot somewhere for speed testing because I wouldn't have even had nearly enough space in my driveway. Plus, a crash at that kind of speed is virtually guaranteed to break something, possibly multiple somethings. The point is, 12.5 miles per hour is just fine. Battery life is decent. I found that the batteries lasted about 12 to 14 minutes of continuous driving on a mix of pavement and grass. The motor does get a bit toasty by the end of a pack, so you might want to limit the amount of time spent in thick grass, and maybe just allow a bit of time for the motor to cool in between batteries. The low voltage cutoff works well. It stops the truck before the battery voltage gets dangerously low. The included charger also works fine. It charges reasonably quickly if you have a fast USB power source like my phone charger, which is 2 amp output, rather than just plugging it into a USB port on a computer or other low-powered USB source. There are a few annoyances. The steering is very loose and imprecise. And the servo is pretty slow and weak. Combine that with the stiff, bouncy suspension, and this thing is a bit of a handful to control at times. On rough terrain, it bounces around a lot, giving a slightly out-of-control feel that makes it a bit unpredictable and makes driving near obstacles more challenging. On pavement, it's difficult to keep straight at top speed, and it will sometimes veer off suddenly in one direction or another due to a small change in throttle, a small bump, or sometimes seemingly for no reason at all. I wouldn't expect on-rails handling by any means, but this truck is more wayward than I'd like. Not a deal breaker, but don't expect great handling. The throttle on the transmitter has a very weak return spring, and it started to kind of hang up and stick after only a couple battery packs of driving. It never sticks at full throttle, just part way, and not in a very consistent manner. It never caused any issues really, but it did quickly become annoying. And finally, I think the rear differential is getting worn, or maybe something inside deformed a bit, because after the last run, it's gotten stiffer to turn than it was originally. It's only tighter internally in terms of allowing the wheels to rotate at different speeds. It hasn't gotten more difficult to rotate as a unit in the housing, so it isn't affecting performance much, but it's still a bit concerning. You can hear that kind of creaky noise when you turn it because it's really stiff. And then it wants to kind of just turn all the wheels. I've only driven for 2 full battery packs and 2 partial packs, so not a ton of use so far. So it makes me think I was correct in assuming that the differentials would be the weak point of the drivetrain. Direct replacement plastic diffs are available, as well as metal differentials, so there are at least options if it fails. Still, nothing broke or outright failed so far, and it is fun to drive despite the wild handling. Whether the truck is worth the price to you is going to come down to your tolerance for the issues and your willingness to order parts from China when something breaks. 12 miles per hour may not sound all that impressive, but the speed and torque that this truck has does take it well into a realm where a simple crash could break something. A motor could overheat if driven too hard, and components will fail or wear out sooner or later. That's true of pretty much any hobby-grade RC, though obviously some are built better than others. Since recording the first part of this review, I've actually found a couple direct from China sites where you can order virtually every part for this truck, and even some upgrades. That's good, as it means that it is fully repairable, but you may have to order from a Chinese site and wait a long time for shipping. Ultimately, is this a fantastic truck for the money? Not quite. It is less expensive than brand name models, but it's also built pretty cheap and has a few issues. And spare parts mostly come from Chinese websites, likely via slow boat shipping. But the performance is reasonable, and the one I ordered came with everything needed to get running, including AA's for the transmitter. So I'd say it's not a total no-brainer purchase, but it's at least worth consideration. Just keep your expectations reasonable, and don't believe everything they say in the ads. Hopefully that was helpful. If you have any thoughts or questions, let me know in the comments. As always, thank you for watching. Take care.